On a cold autumn morning, when the mist clung to the ancient stones of Blackthorn Manor like a forgotten sorrow, a young woman arrived carrying a small leather satchel and a lifetime of silent endurance. Her name was Eleanor Ashcombe, and by the time her boots touched the polished marble floor of the great entrance hall, the servants had already decided what kind of person she must be. In a world where birth opened doors and poverty closed them, a maid with graceful manners and educated speech was considered a curiosity, even a threat. The grand halls of the manor glittered with chandeliers, portraits, and memories of generations who had lived believing privilege was a natural right. Yet Eleanor entered those halls without arrogance or fear. She lowered her gaze respectfully, greeted every servant kindly, and accepted her new position with the quiet dignity of someone who understood that honest work carried its own honor. But one person in the household saw only danger. Lady Beatrice Ashford, the Duke's mother, stood at the top of the staircase watching Eleanor with cold, calculating eyes. She was a woman shaped by tradition, a guardian of family reputation who believed every person had a proper place in society. To her, a maid should be invisible, obedient, and grateful. Eleanor's calm confidence appeared less like humility and more like hidden ambition. "How unusual," Lady Beatrice remarked softly, her voice carrying through the hall. "A servant who speaks as though she has attended royal gatherings." The nearby maids exchanged nervous glances. They knew that when Lady Beatrice questioned someone, she rarely sought answers. She sought weakness. Eleanor folded her hands before her. "My lady, I assure you, I have come only to serve the household faithfully." "Faithfully?" Lady Beatrice replied with a faint smile. Many have used that word before attempting to climb beyond their station. The accusation settled over the room like heavy smoke. Eleanor felt every eye upon her, every silent judgment pressing against her fragile dignity. She could have defended herself. She could have revealed the education her father had given her or explained the tragedy that had forced her into service. But she had learned that some people did not listen to truth when pride had already chosen a different story. "I shall prove my loyalty through my actions, my lady," she answered quietly. Lady Beatrice turned away, satisfied that she had made her message clear. Within hours, Eleanor discovered that her arrival had changed the atmosphere of Blackthorn Manor. The other servants watched her carefully, afraid of being seen showing kindness toward someone Lady Beatrice disliked. The head housekeeper assigned her the most difficult duties, from cleaning neglected rooms to carrying heavy trays through endless corridors. Yet Eleanor complained to no one. Each morning she rose before sunrise. Each evening she completed her tasks beneath the golden glow of fading candlelight. The manor tested her strength, but it never managed to steal her gentleness. That very quality was what first caught the attention of Duke Sebastian Ashford. He returned from London unexpectedly on a grey afternoon, arriving by carriage as rain whispered against the windows. The household hurried to welcome him, but Sebastian noticed something different before he heard any explanation. Near the servants' entrance, Eleanor stood alone, carefully repairing a torn curtain instead of leaving the work for another person. There was no performance in her kindness. No attempt to gain attention. Only quiet responsibility. Later that evening, during tea service, one of the younger servants deliberately moved too quickly and caused a tray to slip near Eleanor. The fragile porcelain crashed and hot tea spilled across the floor beside her. The servant immediately blamed Eleanor. "She was careless, Your Grace." The room became silent. Sebastian looked from the broken pieces to Eleanor's composed expression. He saw embarrassment in her eyes but not dishonesty. He saw someone willing to accept humiliation rather than harm another person. Before anyone could speak again, the Duke stepped forward. "Interesting," he said calmly. "For a mistake committed by two hands, only one person appears eager to accept the blame." The servant lowered his gaze. Lady Beatrice watched her son carefully from across the room. Sebastian did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His presence alone carried authority. "No honest labor diminishes a person's worth," he said. "Nor does cruelty elevate another." The words remained in the room long after he had left. For Eleanor they were more than a defense. They were the first sign that someone within Blackthorn Manor had looked beyond her position and seen the woman beneath it. For Lady Beatrice, however, they were a warning. She had spent years controlling every corner of her son's world, protecting the Ashford name from anything she considered unsuitable. Now, for the first time, she saw curiosity in Sebastian's eyes toward someone she believed should never have been noticed. That night, beneath the shadow of the manor's towering windows, Lady Beatrice opened a private letter and wrote a single command to the head housekeeper. The new maid must leave. And before the Duke discovered the truth she feared most, Lady Beatrice intended to make certain Eleanor Ashcombe would have no place left to remain. The following morning, whispers moved through Blackthorn Manor like a hidden storm. Servants who had once ignored Eleanor now watched her with uneasy curiosity, wondering why the Duke had defended a woman without title or fortune. Eleanor sensed the change but did not understand its cause. She only knew that danger had quietly entered her life. As she arranged flowers in the eastern corridor, she noticed Lady Beatrice standing at the far end, holding a sealed envelope and wearing an expression colder than winter. In that moment, Eleanor realized her greatest trial had not yet begun, and someone powerful was preparing to erase her from the only home she had left. But Eleanor did not know that the envelope contained the first step of cruelty's plan. Lady Beatrice's plan began quietly, as all dangerous schemes often did. There were no raised voices, no dramatic accusations, only carefully chosen whispers moving through Blackthorn Manor's corridors like invisible smoke. By breakfast, servants who once admired Eleanor's patience had begun exchanging doubtful glances. A maid who had never spoken an unkind word suddenly became the subject of cruel speculation. The head housekeeper, acting under Lady Beatrice's instruction, increased Eleanor's responsibilities until exhaustion became her constant companion. She was ordered to polish forgotten silver, organize abandoned storage rooms, and repair delicate fabrics damaged by years of neglect. Yet Eleanor continued with unwavering grace. She understood that anger would only provide her enemies with the evidence they desired. Sebastian noticed the change. Each evening when he returned from estate matters, he found Eleanor still working while others had already retired. Her hands carried small marks from labor, but her expression remained composed. He began to wonder what kind of strength allowed someone to endure such treatment without bitterness. One afternoon, he found her in the library arranging old volumes that had gathered dust for decades. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, touching the golden edges of the books and illuminating the quiet determination in her face. "You spend your days restoring what others have neglected," Sebastian said. Eleanor turned with surprise. "It is only my duty, Your Grace." "Perhaps," he replied, "but many perform duties. Few perform them with devotion." His words carried a warmth she had not expected. Eleanor lowered her eyes, afraid that allowing herself comfort would make the disappointment of losing it even harder. Before she could answer, footsteps approached. Lady Beatrice entered the library, her expression immediately hardening when she saw her son speaking privately with the maid. "The Duke's time is valuable," she said coldly. "Surely there are matters more suitable for his attention." Sebastian looked toward his mother. Kindness is never an unsuitable matter. The exchange was brief, but Eleanor felt the invisible battle between them. Lady Beatrice did not merely dislike her. She feared the connection forming between her and Sebastian. That fear soon turned into action. During a formal dinner attended by several noble families from neighboring estates, Lady Beatrice presented Eleanor with an opportunity designed to destroy her. A family brooch, one of the Ashford heirlooms, disappeared shortly before the guests departed. The jewel had belonged to Sebastian's grandmother, and its sentimental value made the loss even more serious. The household immediately became tense. Lady Beatrice did not accuse Eleanor directly. She did something far more damaging. She allowed suspicion to speak for her. "Of course," she said softly, "we must search everywhere, even among those whose circumstances may tempt them toward unfortunate choices." Her eyes rested briefly on Eleanor. The message was understood by everyone. Eleanor stood in silence as servants searched rooms throughout the manor. She felt humiliation rising within her, not because she feared discovery, but because she knew some people had already decided she was guilty. Then Sebastian arrived. He listened carefully before making his decision. "If a search is required," he said, "then every room shall be examined equally. No servant will be singled out because of their position." Lady Beatrice's expression tightened. "But surely, Sebastian—" "No," he interrupted gently. "Justice cannot exist when it is offered only to those society considers important." The search continued. Minutes later, the missing brooch was discovered hidden inside the sewing basket of a senior servant who had secretly supported Lady Beatrice's judgment against Eleanor. The truth spread through the dining hall with uncomfortable speed. Eleanor was cleared. Yet the victory brought her no joy. She had learned that innocence did not erase the pain of being suspected. Later that evening, Sebastian found her standing near the old chapel window, watching rain fall over the gardens. The manor was quiet, but the silence between them carried countless unspoken emotions. "You should not have to endure such cruelty," he said. Eleanor gave a faint smile. Cruelty is easier to survive when one remembers that it reveals the heart of the person who gives it. Sebastian studied her with admiration. You speak as though you have forgiven those who have not apologized. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, Your Grace. Sometimes it only means refusing to become like those who wounded you. For a moment, Sebastian had no reply. He had known many people who possessed wealth, influence, and beautiful manners. Yet he had rarely encountered someone whose character remained untouched by hardship. Before leaving, he removed a single white rose from the garden and placed it beside the chapel window. For someone who brings beauty into places that have forgotten it, he said. Eleanor looked at the flower after he departed, her heart filled with emotions she dared not name. By morning, the entire household had noticed the rose. Servants whispered that the Duke had left it himself. Guests arriving for the week's gatherings carried the rumor beyond the manor walls. The story grew with every retelling until Eleanor became the center of attention she had never sought. Lady Beatrice heard the whispers while standing beneath the grand staircase, surrounded by portraits of ancestors who had guarded the Ashford name for generations. She realized her attempts to remove Eleanor had achieved the opposite. The maid she wanted forgotten had become the one person everyone was watching. With cold determination, Lady Beatrice opened a hidden drawer containing old documents and sealed letters. If kindness had made Eleanor admired, then she would search for a secret capable of destroying her completely. And as the candle flame flickered across the papers, Lady Beatrice found a name she had been hoping never to see again. The discovery brought no relief to Lady Beatrice, only a renewed sense of urgency. She knew the past held a weapon that could shatter Eleanor's fragile peace forever. Yet she did not realize that uncovering the truth would force her to confront the darkest choices she had made and the consequences ahead. The rain arrived over Blackthorn Manor with the fury of a forgotten sorrow, covering the gardens in silver mist and turning the ancient windows into mirrors of trembling light. Inside the Western Library, where candle flames danced upon shelves of worn volumes, Eleanor Ashcombe sought refuge from the endless whispers that had followed her since the night of the missing brooch. The storm had trapped the household indoors, but Eleanor welcomed the quiet. For the first time in days, no servant watched her with suspicion, and no careless rumor followed her footsteps. She arranged damaged books near the fireplace, carefully repairing pages weakened by time. To her, restoring forgotten things felt strangely familiar. She knew what it meant to be overlooked, judged, and nearly discarded. Sebastian Ashford entered the library without announcing himself. The Duke had always been surrounded by people eager to please him, yet he often found the greatest honesty in the moments when he stood alone. Seeing Eleanor beside the fire, surrounded by old books and gentle candlelight, he felt a peace he had rarely discovered within his own grand home. "You possess remarkable patience," he said. Eleanor turned, startled by his presence. "Patience is sometimes the only possession left to those who have little else." The words remained between them. Sebastian stepped closer but kept the respectful distance demanded by society. "You speak as though hardship has been a familiar companion." Eleanor looked toward the rain-covered window. For years she had protected her past with silence. Silence had been safer than truth. Yet something in Sebastian's voice carried neither curiosity nor judgment. It carried understanding. "My father was once a respected clergyman," she finally said. "He devoted his life to helping others, but kindness does not always protect a person from cruelty." Sebastian listened carefully as Eleanor revealed the story she had hidden from everyone at Blackthorn Manor. Her father had been falsely accused by a wealthy landowner who feared losing influence. The accusation spread quickly among those who valued reputation more than justice. Within months, her family name became a source of shame. Friends disappeared, doors closed, and the world that once welcomed them turned away. "When my father passed," Eleanor continued softly, "my mother and I had nothing except memories of what we had lost. I accepted service because honest work was better than allowing pride to destroy us." Sebastian's expression changed. The woman others had judged as ambitious had only been fighting to survive with dignity. "You were not running from your past," he said quietly. "You were carrying it." Eleanor lowered her gaze. Sometimes carrying the past is easier than explaining it to those determined not to understand. The Duke looked into the fire, troubled by how easily society had condemned someone who deserved compassion. He had inherited a title, lands, and influence, yet Eleanor possessed a strength that wealth could never provide. Then Sebastian spoke of his own hidden wounds. "Everyone sees the Duke of Ashford," he said. "They see the estate, the family name, the responsibilities. Few ever ask about the man who carries them." Eleanor looked at him with surprise. He admitted that his life had always been shaped by expectations. From childhood, he had been taught that duty came before happiness, reputation before emotion, and tradition before personal desire. He had learned to command rooms but had forgotten what it felt like to be understood. "Perhaps," Eleanor whispered, "we are both prisoners of things others created for us." A faint smile appeared upon Sebastian's face. "Perhaps we are." The storm continued outside, but within the library, something warmer began to grow. It was not a reckless passion or a careless promise. It was the quiet recognition of two wounded souls who had discovered safety in each other's presence. Before leaving, Sebastian reached into his coat and removed a delicate silk ribbon. The fabric was aged but beautifully preserved. "This belonged to my grandmother," he explained. "She believed true nobility came from compassion, not blood." Eleanor hesitated before accepting it. "I could not take something so precious. My grandmother would have given it to someone exactly like you." The simple statement touched Eleanor more deeply than any grand declaration could have done. She held the ribbon carefully, aware that such a gesture from a duke carried a meaning far beyond the object itself. It was not merely a gift. It was trust. Neither of them noticed the shadow beyond the library doors. Lady Beatrice stood silently in the corridor, her hand resting against the wooden frame. She had come searching for evidence against Eleanor, expecting to find manipulation or deception. Instead, she had discovered something far more dangerous. A connection. A bond that could not be destroyed by rumors alone. Her face remained composed, but inside her heart, anger battled with fear. She had spent years protecting the Ashford name from imagined threats, yet now she faced a truth she refused to accept. Her son, the man she had guided since childhood, was beginning to care for someone she considered unworthy. That night, Lady Beatrice returned to her chamber and opened the documents she had discovered earlier. The old letters, hidden away for years, contained secrets that could ruin Eleanor's reputation. But as she read the first page beneath the candlelight, her confidence began to disappear. The evidence she had hoped would destroy Eleanor did not reveal a scandal. It revealed a connection between their families that had been buried for years. And for the first time, Lady Beatrice wondered if the woman she hated was not Eleanor Ashcombe's greatest mistake, but her own. The following morning, the manor's silence would break beneath a revelation no one expected. Lady Beatrice had believed secrets were weapons meant for destruction, yet the truth she uncovered carried a different power. It threatened not only Eleanor's future, but the very foundation of the Ashford family itself. Meanwhile, Sebastian remained unaware that the storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest approaching within Blackthorn. The winter ball at Blackthorn Manor arrived beneath a sky of silver clouds, its arrival announced by the glow of countless lanterns along the winding road and the sound of carriages approaching through the frost-covered gardens. Within hours, the grand halls that had once echoed with whispers against Eleanor Ashcombe were transformed into a world of music, crystal chandeliers, and elegant gowns. Yet beneath the beauty of the evening, tension waited like a hidden storm. Eleanor stood at the edge of the ballroom, wearing a simple but graceful gown chosen for her by the housekeeper. She did not belong among the jeweled aristocrats who filled the room, or so she had been told many times. Every glance reminded her of the invisible boundary society had placed between those born with titles and those forced to serve them. But Sebastian saw only the woman standing before him. The Duke entered the ballroom moments later, dressed in formal black attire, his presence immediately commanding the attention of every guest. Many admired his wealth and position, but Eleanor noticed something different. She noticed the loneliness behind his composed expression, the same loneliness she had seen in the quiet corners of the manor. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a brief moment, the noise disappeared. Then Lady Beatrice moved forward. She had spent days preparing for this night. She knew the eyes of society would be upon her, and she intended to use that attention as a weapon. To her, Eleanor was not merely a servant. She was a danger to everything Lady Beatrice had spent her life protecting. When the musicians paused between dances, Lady Beatrice stepped into the center of the ballroom. "Before this evening continues," she announced, "there is a matter of great importance that must be addressed." The room fell silent. Eleanor felt every gaze turned toward her. Lady Beatrice held herself with perfect elegance, the expression of a woman convinced that she represented justice. "It has become necessary," she continued, "to protect the honor of this family from those who misunderstand their position." The words struck Eleanor harder than any accusation could have. She had endured insults. She had endured suspicion. But hearing her dignity questioned before the entire world created a pain she struggled to hide. "Lady Beatrice," Sebastian said firmly, stepping forward, But his mother raised one hand. "Allow me to finish, Sebastian." The Duke stopped, though concern filled his eyes. Lady Beatrice turned toward Eleanor. "You entered this household as a maid, yet somehow you have gained influence beyond your station. A rose left in secret. Private conversations. A duke defending you against his own household." Whispers spread through the ballroom. Eleanor lowered her eyes not because she was guilty, but because she refused to let anger destroy her grace. "I have never sought his grace's attention," she said quietly. Lady Beatrice smiled coldly. "Perhaps not openly." The accusation created a silence heavier than the music. Sebastian's expression changed. The patience he had shown his mother for years began to disappear. "You have mistaken kindness for weakness," he said. Lady Beatrice looked at him with disappointment. "And you have mistaken affection for truth." Before Sebastian could answer, she gave the order for Eleanor's belongings to be brought forward. The ballroom watched as a small collection of Eleanor's possessions was placed before everyone. A few dresses, a worn book, the leather satchel she had carried when she first arrived. Lady Beatrice looked at the objects as though they proved her argument. "This is what she brought into our home." Eleanor felt a familiar ache inside her chest. She had always known society measured people by what they possessed, but she had hoped kindness might matter more. Then Sebastian walked toward her. Slowly, deliberately. Every person in the ballroom watched as the Duke crossed the distance between them. He did not look embarrassed. He did not hesitate. He removed his gloves and extended his hand. A gasp moved through the crowd. "Eleanor Ashcombe," he said, his voice calm and powerful. "Do not lower your head because others cannot recognize your worth." Her eyes filled with emotion, but she remained silent. Sebastian turned toward the guests. "This woman has shown more honor inside these walls than many who have spent their lives surrounded by privilege." Lady Beatrice's face tightened. "Sebastian, think carefully about what you are declaring." "I have never been more certain." The ballroom remained frozen. Then an elderly gentleman near the entrance stepped forward. "Your Grace," he said, his voice trembling with recognition. Everyone turned. The man was Lord Edmund Whitmore, a retired judge known throughout England for his honesty. His eyes rested on Eleanor. "Miss Ashcombe, I believe your father's name deserves to be heard tonight." Eleanor's breath caught. No one had spoken her father's name in years without attaching shame to it. Lord Whitmore revealed that new evidence had recently uncovered the truth behind the accusations against her father. Records that had been hidden for decades proved that he had been innocent. The scandal that destroyed the Ashcombe family had been built upon lies. Shock moved through the ballroom. The very story society had used to condemn Eleanor was now exposed as a cruel injustice. Lady Beatrice stood motionless. The secret she had searched for had finally appeared, but not in the way she expected. Sebastian looked at Eleanor, seeing the pain and relief fighting within her expression. "You carried a ruined name," he whispered, "when you should have carried a crown of honor." Tears touched Eleanor's eyes. For the first time since entering Blackthorn Manor, she no longer felt like someone waiting to be rejected. She felt seen. Yet as the guests began whispering about Lady Beatrice's mistake, the Duchess-like figure of the Ashford family refused to surrender. Her pride had been wounded before hundreds of witnesses, and wounded pride could become a dangerous thing. She reached into her gown and produced a final sealed letter. "I believe," Lady Beatrice said coldly, "there is still one truth remaining." The ballroom became silent once again. Sebastian looked toward his mother with growing concern. Eleanor felt the fragile hope inside her tremble. Lady Beatrice broke the seal. And as her eyes moved across the page, the confidence that had carried her through the evening slowly vanished. Because the letter she believed would destroy Eleanor Ashcombe contained a revelation that would not condemn the maid. It would expose the very person who had spent years trying to erase her. The sealed letter trembled slightly in Lady Beatrice Ashford's hand as the entire ballroom waited for her next words. Only moments earlier she had believed she held the final weapon capable of destroying Eleanor Ashcombe. She had imagined the young maid standing alone, exposed before society, her fragile reputation shattered beyond repair. But as Lady Beatrice read the contents beneath the golden light of the chandeliers, something changed. The certainty disappeared from her eyes. For years she had believed herself a protector of the Ashford name. She had convinced herself that every cruel decision was made for the sake of honor, every judgment was necessary, and every sacrifice was justified. Yet the words written upon that page forced her to face a truth she had buried beneath pride and tradition. The letter did not reveal Eleanor's disgrace. It revealed Lady Beatrice's own. A deep silence settled over the ballroom. Sebastian watched his mother carefully. He had known her as a woman of strength, discipline, and unshakable confidence. But now, for the first time, he saw something beneath that proud exterior. Regret. "Mother," he said quietly, "what have you discovered?" Lady Beatrice did not answer immediately. Her fingers tightened around the paper. The letter had been written many years before by a man who had witnessed the injustice committed against Eleanor's father. It confirmed that the accusations against Reverend Ashcombe had been false and that certain influential figures had deliberately hidden the evidence to protect their own reputations. Among those who had remained silent was Lady Beatrice herself. She had not created every lie, but she had allowed them to survive. She had chosen reputation over truth. The realization struck harder than any accusation from the crowd. Eleanor stood motionless, unsure whether she should feel anger, sorrow, or relief. For so long, she had carried the weight of a family shame that never belonged to her. She had accepted humiliation because she believed fighting against powerful people would only create more suffering. Now the truth stood before everyone. Not whispered in servants' corridors. Not hidden inside old documents. But spoken beneath the very chandeliers where society had judged her. Lord Whitmore stepped closer. "Lady Beatrice," he said gently, "the greatest tragedy is not that mistakes were made. It is that pride prevented the truth from being corrected when there was still time." The older woman lowered her gaze. The ballroom that had once looked toward Eleanor with suspicion now looked toward Lady Beatrice with disappointment. Yet Eleanor felt no satisfaction. She had dreamed of justice, but she had never wished for another person's humiliation. "Please," Eleanor said softly. Everyone turned toward her. She looked at Lady Beatrice, the woman who had caused her so much pain. "Do not let this moment become another cruelty." The words surprised the entire room. Sebastian looked at Eleanor with admiration. Even after everything she had endured, she refused to answer bitterness with bitterness. Lady Beatrice slowly lifted her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "After everything I have done, why would you show me mercy?" Eleanor's voice remained gentle. "Because I know what it feels like to be judged by a story that is not true." For the first time in many years, Lady Beatrice had no defense. Her pride had protected her from shame, but Eleanor's compassion left her with nowhere to hide. The woman who had tried to remove Eleanor from Blackthorn Manor now stood before everyone, realizing that the person she considered beneath her had shown the greatest nobility in the room. The following weeks brought a quiet transformation to the estate. The whispers that once followed Eleanor disappeared. Servants who had avoided her began speaking openly, no longer afraid of Lady Beatrice's judgment. The household changed slowly, not because traditions vanished overnight, but because kindness had finally been given a place among them. Sebastian also changed. He had spent years believing that a duke's greatest responsibility was protecting his family's legacy. But Eleanor taught him that legacy was not built from wealth, titles, or ancient names. It was built from the lives one chose to honor. One evening, as winter faded into spring, Sebastian found Eleanor walking through the gardens where the first white rose had appeared months before. The estate was peaceful. The same paths that once carried whispers now carried laughter. "You have changed this place," Sebastian said. Eleanor smiled softly. "No, Your Grace. This place changed because people finally chose to see what was already there." Sebastian looked at her for a long moment. "You still call me Your Grace?" She lowered her gaze with a playful warmth. "You are still the Duke of Ashford. And you are still the woman who believes titles matter less than character. Because they do." A quiet smile touched his face. Then he reached for her hand. Not as a duke offering kindness to a servant, but as a man asking another person to share his future. "I spent my life surrounded by people who wanted my name," he said. "You were the first person who cared about the man carrying it." Eleanor's eyes filled with emotion. "Sebastian, I do not wish to give you a place beside me because society demands it," he continued. "I wish to give you that place because my life has become empty without you in it." The garden seemed to hold their breath. Then Eleanor accepted his hand. Months later, the wedding bells of Blackthorn Manor rang across the countryside. Guests who once questioned Eleanor's place now celebrated her as the duchess who brought compassion back into an ancient family. Lady Beatrice attended quietly. She never forgot the pain her pride had caused, but she also never forgot the mercy Eleanor had offered when revenge would have been easier. The world had expected a servant girl to fall beneath the weight of society's judgment. Instead, Eleanor Ashcombe rose with grace. She proved that dignity was not inherited through bloodlines, nor purchased through wealth. It was revealed through choices made in moments when cruelty seemed easier than kindness. And the greatest mistake Lady Beatrice ever made was believing that Eleanor was someone who could be driven away. Because the woman she tried to remove from Blackthorn Manor became the very person who restored its honor, healed its wounds, and reminded everyone within its walls that true nobility had never belonged to titles alone. It had always belonged to the heart.